call this regular meeting of council to order, dated Tuesday, March 8th, 2022. And I'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inkla-Katmuk and Syilx people. One quick announcement that came through my desk today is that at Crossroads Church on March 13th at 8 p.m., there will be a prayer and candle vigil for the Ukrainian residents. Candles will be provided, and they're encouraging people to bring their guitars. We'll now go I just kind of wished right through public input. And we do have Ginny Prowal up for public input, item 9.4, agenda item. I think you have to turn it on.
Of course, no, batteries are flat. So. Well, my computer died, my printer fell apart.
Sounded like a country song, Ginny. You're in the right community now.
I'm not feeling very comfortable. I have to scribble.
That's almost NASCAR speed.
No kidding.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Lois.
Obviously knows what he's doing. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Thank you for
Now, I can't hear that. Oh, well, I'm not even sure if it's...
Hello?
Oh, it's on the internet version.
Yes, and with the way the system in this room works now, that microphone is hooked into the computer so everyone watching can see, but can you just speak up and make sure you...
Oh, I can do that. Okay, I wanted to speak to 9.4, the Claybanks RV Park, and I was absolutely delighted to see that council is going to do something about this. So I have a couple of thoughts, well, one really good one actually. That park is always full, and it is beautiful, and it's a shame what's happened to it. Anyway, if you notice the sign, it says the BC Regreening Program was the one that originally did the site, and I know darn well that if they were contacted, they would be delighted to come back, have a look at what's happened, and redo it. The reason I'm confident is because the last time I talked to them, which was about a year ago, they complained bitterly that the city hasn't asked for any programs. Well, here's your chance, and they would do an amazing job. So just contact BC Regreening, and I'm sure they'll come have a look at the site and come up with some proposals for you. And it doesn't cost a dime, which is even better. But the second part of this is where I get angry. The Togo Yard Waste has pushed the Coldwater River over to the side of what was its stream, pushed it right up Garcia and right into Claybanks and the park, the RV park. Now, when I was on the previous council and Togo announced their closure, we said, well, what are you going to do with the mess? And they said they were going to clean it up, or the new owner would, or they would do it jointly. The Ministry of Environment had ordered them to clean it up, and they've done nothing. So it's deep, and it pushes that river right around the corner, and you can't go through it. So I'm suggesting that you get hold of the ministry and ask them, hey, what's happening here? Because nothing has been done, and it's been years. I don't know when Togo closed. Somebody might remember, 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's been quite a while. Anyway, and that pile is like this deep. So if you look down at Claybanks, you can see how the river's been pushed right over to right up Garcia into the RV park, and then it goes under the bridge, and which of course has been knocked out. I find that disgusting that they have ignored the needs of this community to clean up. And is there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Prowal? Seeing none.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Did you have Councillor Christopherson?
Yeah, thank you, Ginny, for bringing that up. And my question isn't for you, it's for our CAO. Is this something that we should follow up on? Or has it already been followed up on?
Mr. Smith.
If I can just get clarity, the BC regreening question?
No,
or the ministry?
Ministry of Environment regarding the Toko site cleanup.
We have been for many months in conversations with Tolko. Whether I would say it's specifically about cleanup, we've been talking about the riverbed generally, the Tolko property, the need potentially for where the ultimate riverbed's going to lie. So they have been part of those conversations with the conversations we've had with multiple different ministries. There's been some movement on particular items, as you guys well know. The bridge is coming out and there is some work that's being done on that corner. And if you're not going to see it here, but in this where we had some temporary works that's really kind of diverting it this way, there's probably going to be some work to create some flattening there as well to be able to hopefully create a straighter river channel that will redirect it back towards the bridge route. So I will say this, that engineers are working on this issue, and there's been approvals given for some of those works on a temporary basis, and again working on the long-term design. So but I don't think that squarely addresses Ginny's question of cleanup of the rest of the site. And so I can say that we have had discussions on that point, but it's somewhat subject right now to further environmental review because there's different levels of remediation that are required depending on the degree of contamination that's on site. So I don't have any more specific information I can provide at that point.
But we are aware of it and are looking into it. Okay.
Yeah, we're working fairly closely with Toko on the issues. So thank you for that. Now into adoption of the minutes, 4.1. I need a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on February 22nd, 2022 be adopted. Christopherson and Etchart. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, none, carried. There are no delegations. There's no unfinished, yes there is. There's 2 unfinished business items. 7.1, Nicola Valley Community Theatre Society, recommendations from February 22nd, 2022 presentation. And Mr. Smith? Councillor Christopherson?
Yeah, I'm a director of the society, so I'll recuse myself.
Thank you. And can someone ensure that the door gets closed behind Mr. Christopherson?
It doesn't need to be closed.
It doesn't need to be?
No.
Okay, we're not doing that anymore? Okay. Haven't done it for a while, right? Okay. See, he's so used to doing that, it just...
He's going to close it anyways.
Yeah.
Long. Make sure you don't take any texts in between. Your Worship and Council, the report really is a follow-up on the basis of Mr. Hodson's presentation that was provided at the last council meeting. And the 2 items that staff is recommending at this point is that council direct staff to examine the feasibility of a performing arts theater addition on the Civic Center, with costs to be coming from NVCTS coffers, and that council direct staff to explore options for purchasing the NVCTS property at 2102 Kootley Avenue. This council will know, and it actually even dates back to the previous council as well, that this is a project that has been around in our community for quite some time. It has changed in its form, its iterations, whether it would include multiple theaters that would have movie as well as performing arts. And really what's being proposed right now is coming back closer to what was initially discussed at a previous meeting back really in 2019, to look at options for attaching the performing arts, a performing arts theater to the Civic Center. And there was one option in particular, which you will see in your package as Scheduled B, which is what we would be looking to explore as part of this project. As it stands, we've heard concerns both from the society itself in the grant processes, as they've put in a lot of work over multiple grants but haven't been successful in that. I think that this has a lot to do with timing and COVID, and I think that both public and council are well aware of that. That being said, it's a strong society with a project that would very likely benefit our community. And so from staff's perspective, we think it makes sense where the dollars are already there to at least explore the feasibility of that, to bring you back more specific information, costing, design potential, and possibilities to allow you to make further decisions. We aren't at this point looking for where the funding would come from. Realistically, the reserves we have, it's the opinion of staff that this would likely need to be a completely grant-funded project if it were going to move forward. And there have been many discussions with the Theatre Society in the past as to what operation would look like, and the potential involvement with the Arts Council if this was going to move forward. But at this point, it's really just seeking authorization to do some preliminary investigation that would allow you to make a decision likely in June or July of this year.
Investigation at the expense of the Nicola Valley Community Theatre Society.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Doesn't look like it. We're open for debate at this point. Mr. Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I've got a couple of concerns about this, and I understand where this theater would be fantastic in our community and things like that, and I would fully support that. However, we have so many priorities and things happening in our community right now with the flooding, the fires, and all the things that we have to do, and we've already got a big long wish list and things like this, and I am just a little worried that this is going to take some staff time to do at a time when, and it's going to be a distraction for staff to get on with some other things in our community at this time. And I'm just a little concerned about that. I'm concerned about the process that's taken place with the theater as well. It's not that I don't support a theater, but there's many communities larger than ours are still fighting to get theaters in their community as well. And onto the thing, and I was talking to some people recently and trying to get a little bit of the history about the theater and everything in the past. I think since 2009, they've been trying to get this off the ground and everything, and some of the things they've been trying to get going. And so my concern is that I think their financial modeling is broken. I would certainly, if we're going to do an investigation in not just the looking at the cost of building a facility, but also the financially modeling that would go with that. I think that's broken. I know they're not looking at the theater piece anymore, the cinema or the what do we call the movie theater or anything anymore. But I think we need to look at the financial modeling of that too. As I've talked to people in the community, and they're just concerned about what this is going to cost them as taxpayers and what we're going to do here. I understand in the early days that this was going to be a standalone theater that the society was going to take care of. It wasn't going to cost the taxpayer any money. And through my experience with these things, we always see these shifts where they suddenly become the taxpayer's responsibility and needing to find the funding for those things. So one of the other things that I heard.
Tony, can I stop you for a second? we don't have anything on the floor right now. We need a mover and a seconder in order to open the debate.
Oh, okay. Should have done that before I started,
I
I guess.
tried to do that. I thought you were going to.
Oh, okay. Oh, I can, well, my motion will be, then I can move the motion, because I was looking at this motion, but I was also looking at, and I guess I was looking at a motion of a referral here, and I guess it's kind of similar to what we're doing here. Referral is going to take us to look at more information. So I will move the motion that's currently on the table then, Mayor, before I continue.
Are we doing recommendation 1 only, recommendation 1 and?
Are we going
It's
to
an
do them
and.
together
Okay,
or
it's an
separate? I
and.
think there's probably 2 discussions there to have, Mayor, one on the theater, one on the property, because I think they're two things to discuss differently.
Okay,
So I'll
you're-
move that motion if I get a seconder for it.
Okay, and a seconder?
Continue. So the other part of this too, as I've talked to people in the community and a few things like that, is one of the things, this has not really been in the scrutiny and the preview of the public per se, in the sense that the general public have had not a lot of chances, I understand, I could be wrong, to really discuss the feasibility of a theater in the community. And I think it would be part of the process of looking at the costs and all this, of having a town hall meeting to discuss this in public, the need for this community and this theater as well. And I think that's a huge part of it, because I just got to get a feel from the rest of the public and how they're feeling about this. I think this is an expense that some of the taxpayers are just a little uncomfortable with what this is going to cost and everything. So I would certainly like to add that into that motion, that was also include a lot of public input, including a town hall meeting, or committee of the whole meeting, or something like that, to discuss the pros and cons of this theater as well. So a couple of things I'd just like to add: the financial modeling, see if it's up to date, get all the up to date numbers, and certainly a town hall meeting where we can have a proper public debate on this theater as well. So that's what I have for now.
That's not part of the
I know it's not
recommendation?
I know it's not part of it, then I'll make a motion I'll make an amendment that it does become part of the motion.
Okay, it changes the direction completely.
Then I'll make a motion to refer this.
Okay, we've got a motion on the table.
Okay, well, I can make a motion during the
Councillor
motion to refer,
Etchart?
just so you know.
Well, that was a lot to hear. I can appreciate some of the comments that Councillor Luck has mentioned. As somebody who has lived here for a long time and has grown up here and was born here, I can also say that there's a lot of people who really appreciate the theater and feel a loss ever since we lost it in the 90s. There's also a lot of people, the Arts Council and different groups, who are really hoping for this facility. And I like the idea that we're looking at the feasibility, maybe through grant funding of some kind. And I was hoping that if we looked at this, that maybe if through different applications and different streams, if we could really look at this through grant funding, because the society has worked really hard on this and really kept the project alive for so long that I don't want to just say, oh, well, we don't have any money, because obviously we need to find revenue streams for all of this. And we did have a theater, and any long-term resident really did have that theater experience for a long time. And you look at Penticton with their convention center, and we really have to think about, if we're going to grow, we may have some opportunities to use a civic center or maybe NVIT, but if we grow, I'm sure people will use it. As this civic center was a big question in the 1980s, and a lot of people said, oh, we'll not use it, but it's heavily used. So we really have to think about, as we grow, the need will increase as well. And I do agree that we do have responsibilities for finance, but we also have to really think about what events maybe we could have here if we did have it as well. So thank you for that.
Councillor Fair.
Thank you. To go back to what Councillor Luck said in the beginning there, the concern that their staff already has many pressing priorities, and that this maybe isn't one that should be at the top of the list. I don't know if there's a way we can defer this.
I am, the timing is not the greatest.
Oh,
Um,
bad timing.
There are staffing priorities. On the other hand, this is a feasibility study that will be a contracted out position or piece of work for another body to look at. And it is being completely paid for by the Community Theatre Society. I actually want to see this, at least the feasibility looked at, to see if we can take this on. And I think this is a project that we can look at. It's dependent on grant-funded projects, and it's something I think we can use as a community. Timing is wrong, but we can hang on to it for a while. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ordinarily, I wouldn't chime in at this stage, but as a number of councillors have questioned whether staff would have the ability to take this component on, I felt that was appropriate. What I would say is that you're correct. Staff has lots of projects on the go. That being said, this particular step of the process, where it's feasibility, we've got the ability in-house to be able to support that. As you've said, this is primarily the work of a consultant, not the work of staff that's driving this. The next step, once feasibility is brought forward, and I think this may actually speak to Councillor Luck's point as well, if you're going to have community discussion or debate or any of those points, you kind of need to have a design, costs, you need to have a bit of modeling, and we just aren't at the spot right now where we have that in place. And so I think that there would be more opportunity for robust discussion at the future step once there is a bit more feasibility scoped out. And at that point, I think that everything that is being said here, this isn't a done deal for sure at this point. But I think that it would be really hard to ever get there if there isn't a little bit more work done to try and figure out what this would look like conceptually, and also allow the Theatre Society, the city, and potentially other organizations to look at what would the delivery model for services be within that structure. So I don't want council to be overly concerned about staff time at this juncture. Okay. You are right that there is going to be staff time at some point on this if council chooses to move forward with the project. But I would say that probably what you're looking at is a number of grant applications, and so this isn't looking like the project is starting this year or probably next or maybe even the one after that. This is really a question at this point of, does council want to keep it alive by further investigating or not? Thank you, Your Worship, for allowing me to add in a little bit of extra context.
No, thank you for that clarity, Mr. Smith.
Councillor Fair, Councillor Etchart. Fair, if you're willing to speak next, that's fine. But Councillor Etchart first.
The other point that I was going to make is, even if we had the feasibility study done and there was some financing, we typically would have to have a vote anyway for any kind of finance item over 5 years. So if things kind of got to a point where we had any kind of big project that we were going to spend any amount of money, like what we did with the fire hall, we would end up with a vote for financing anyway. So I know earlier, of course we'd have to consult with everybody anyhow, but I think that it's just something that we should consider just to see what we have for options, and that's why I support it. Thank you.
Councillor White.
In the conversations that I've had, the biggest concern is what it's going to cost the city to operate it if it goes ahead. So I think that's a very important piece in the feasibility study that needs to really be focused on so that the public can have a clear picture of what's going to happen moving forward after if it's okayed and carrying on.
And I would personally like to see this kept alive, but I do agree that I think we need to look at the future operating potential and tie it to grants. So seeing no more comments, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And there's a second part to this recommendation. I need a mover and a seconder. That council direct staff to explore options for purchasing the Nicola Valley Community Theatre Society's property at 2102 Kootley Avenue. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, none, carried. All right. Welcome back, Councillor Christopherson. And we're moving on to 7.2, North Bench Crown Land Tenure Application. Mr. MacArthur, to introduce.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is with regard to the Crown Land Tenure Application portion of the North Bench project. When Council first directed staff to contract a consultant to work on this project back in early 2020, there were two components to this project. The first is this portion, the Crown Land Tenure Application, which would be to acquire that tenure over the lands in the North Bench area to improve parks and trails in the area, to establish a championship level disc golf course, and also to improve other amenities such as the parking areas in those lands at the trail accesses. The other portion of the project is the residential side, creating a neighborhood development plan for potential residential in the lower portion of those lands. That portion of this project is ongoing. The consultants are preparing the draft for that, and that will be presented to council at a later date for consideration. But for now, we're just considering the Crown Land Tenure application for the parks, trails, etc. So the application is attached to this document, attachments A through E, including attachment B, which is the management plan. I hope you were able to access that. I know it wasn't displaying on eScribe, but if you download it, you can view that document. And the basic sort of overview of this is that there's a number of items that would be potentially, if the province were to approve this application, that would be improved, and that is the parking areas, as I mentioned, some increased signage in the area for both to guide users through the trail network, but also potentially historical or First Nations markers, and other cultural aspects that could be incorporated for First Nations. The improvement of the trail surfaces themselves, as well as installation of the disc golf baskets. Disc golf is unlike a golf course that you would think of where there's a large disturbance of the land. Disc golf will be incorporated into the natural landscape. So it's really just installing those baskets where the discs are thrown into. And of course, we do have a 9-hole disc golf course in the bench park that was installed last year. So residents can kind of get an idea of what disc golf is all about. The Nicola Valley Disc Golf Association has formed, and they're excited about this project, and the city staff are wanting to work with them to work on this idea of the installation of the disc golf course, especially the baskets themselves, and how those will be funded. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory of what we're looking at here based on the documents provided. So if council has any questions, staff are here at your pleasure.
Any questions for Mr. MacArthur? Councillor Fair?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there's any sort of timeline that we can come up with as to the establishment of the disc golf course. And I just want to point out for the public and anyone who might be listening that this is not part of the neighborhood development plan, so it's not as though this is taking the place of a potential housing development.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fair, through your worship. The first thing here is that we would need provincial approval, and that approval could take some months. So it's hard to determine whether construction on disc golf course, construction, installation of the baskets, etc., would happen this year, or whether that would be, a future year, 2023 perhaps. Yeah, so it's probably not likely that it would happen this year. There's an outside chance late in the year, potentially, but it's probably a 2023 project. And in fact, all of these items that I mentioned would likely be 2023 capital items that would come forward in that budget to council for consideration.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith, did you have another comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add on one small element, but important element to what Don indicated as well, and that is around the First Nations consultation that has happened around this project. And that is part, not entirely, but part of the reason why this is being brought forward is two separate components in the first place. And that is, as we began having consultation with many of our surrounding First Nations, which to date have included Coldwater, Upper Nicola, Lower Nicola, and Shacken bands. We've yet to connect with Cooks Ferry or Newitch on this particular project. But during that, the primary points for opportunity, but also some of the primary concerns that were raised were around the lower portion where the future housing, if it were to advance, some of the bands indicated that this may be an excellent opportunity for a gathering house or some other opportunities and amenities as well. But I did want council to know that why we are proceeding with this portion of the application is because there were not any major concerns raised with this portion of the application in relation to the recreational components. And I think that there's going to be, in addition to the plan itself, which is going to need work and refinement, in my view, we need to continue with our First Nations consultation and engagement to make sure that we're going to be on the same page before that second component were to move forward.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Christopherson?
Thank you. With the First Nations consultations, I know I brought up the issue before and that it's been listened to, but because I live in that area and walk it quite often, I'm aware of archaeological sites that are there, and I'm sure those are being brought up with First Nations talk. But in the meantime, some of them are being absolutely decimated during the pine beetle when they were removing trees. Some of the sites were obliterated, and some of the trails go right through some of the sites. And so I'm just wondering if there's something that we can do to protect the sites that are known before anything starts to happen up there. They're not always easily visible, but because I have worked with First Nations in the past and I'm aware of some of the sites, I know where they are, but they're not easily identifiable, and I just really don't want to see them decimated while we're looking at how we can develop the area properly. So I'm not sure what you can suggest, but just to be aware that there are sites that need to be protected. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Christopherson. And I can say that as part of the neighborhood development plan, the first phase of that is very high level for an application, but the intent there was to have a second phase of that if the province approved that type of development, to have an archaeological site investigation. It could be that site investigation is moved up in that process depending on additional consultation with First Nations that Mr. Smith alluded to. So I think that would be, that's going to be an important component of that project. The timing of that investigation is really hasn't been decided at this point, but that's also why we're not ready to bring forward that plan to council. So.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that while we're doing this consultation and so on, there's lots of biking trails that are starting there and motorbikes, and most of them stay to the trails quite nicely and so on. But having observed over the last several years, there's always shortcuts that people take and zoom through certain areas, and I'm just wondering if there's something that we can do in consultation with First Nations to identify some of those areas early, just so that we know where they are. And one of the last remaining fire pits that's easily identifiable is now a bicycle path, and people go right through the middle of it, and I'm sure they have no idea what they're walking through. But some of those sites are fragile, and if we don't kind of get a grip on it soon, I think we'll lose them.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Christopherson. First, thank you for raising that. I think that's it's not just a valuable reminder. I think it's part of Council's commitment towards reconciliation generally, and so we want you to know that we've heard what you've said, and we will work to address that potentially at an earlier phase than it would naturally occur because of an authorization process or whatever it is. The other thing that I will say is, at least as staff, we very much view the work that's happened to date as part of that reconciliation as well. Traditionally, what's happened is any form of colonial government will make an application with an already, here's what the project is going to look like, and then the opportunity to discuss that is done as part of that authorization or approval process. So this is just kind of the pre-discussion, and then as this Crown Tenure application goes through, part of that is formal consultation as well. And so there will be opportunities as part of that to potentially identify more sites. But what I do want Council to know is that we've heard you, and if we can identify the right knowledge keepers to be able to potentially walk those grounds and identify sites, and if there's things that we can do preliminarily, we will work to do so and potentially bring further information back to you on that.
And if I may just add one other point on this too, the Crown Land Tenure application that's in front of Council tonight, one of the items is the incorporation of First Nations cultural aspects, and so that could potentially be some signage informing people that this area may be a site of importance and to please respect the area, that sort of thing. And so having actual tenure over the lands would allow the city to install those sorts of signage or those sorts of things. So whereas right now it being Crown land, we don't have that same sort of authority. So.
Seeing no other questions for staff, I need a mover and a seconder on the motion that Council directs staff and the consultant to submit the North Bench Crown Tenure application to the province for consideration. Christopherson and Luck. Any comments? One of the things I'd like to ask Mr. MacArthur, it's not really an ask, it's a comment. You talked about the potential that we could purchase the baskets and then get reimbursed from the society. That's not something we usually do, is to loan money to a society for something like that. So hopefully we can look at some other kind of arrangement. I don't want the public to think we can now loan anything. We're not in the loan business, is what I'm trying to say. That's a different.
Can I slightly recharacterize this? It would be city tenure. It would be our disc golf park, and so it would be us putting in the baskets. Yep. And if they choose to pay for the cost of that out of whatever comes out of theirs, that's them giving back to the community, but this would be a city initiative. So
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that.
Instead of saying we're loaning them to do
Yeah.
something, this is a city asset, a city function that they would be supporting and contributing to.
Good to hear. Thank you. Any other comments or debate on this issue? I think it's a great idea. We can gain some land, have access for the locals and tourists eventually, and yeah. Councillor Luck. And
Just
then,
just a quick question, Mayor. Mr. MacArthur, what's the timeline on this? What do you think it might be for us? What are we looking at? Sorry, I put you on the spot, did I?
Yeah, thank
sorry.
you, Councillor Luck, through your worship.
Sorry.
The challenge, of course, is when you're putting an application to the province, you don't really know the timelines,
okay.
and we know that it could be 6 months or a year, but we don't actually know. It's really dependent on their workload and how long it takes them to review because they have a lot of work as well on their plate, right? So, but I would suspect it's going to be a number of months at the least. So,
Are we going to be able to have some follow-up at UBCM this year? That we can take one of the ministers to be able to follow up on that with them at UBCM this year? I think I repeated myself, but
I think that might be a Mr. Smith / Mr. Lois question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. He doesn't need to answer that. We'll just, he's heard us, I think, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Christopherson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very much in favor of bringing the area into the city. I think we need to plan for the future, but I think we need to plan wisely for the future and to make sure that we protect the special character of the area, protect the archaeological sites, keep the open park-like setting as much as we can. I would hate to see it all blacktopped over and houses wall to wall, and so I'm very much in favor of the city looking forward into planning effectively an area, and we can't do that if it's not ours to do. So I'm very much in favor of this motion.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm being quite bad today. You're going to have to forgive me. Want to make 2 points of clarification. One, the property is currently in the City of Merritt. It's already within City of Merritt jurisdiction. However, it is Crown land. We have zero right over it. Even if we were to secure some form of Crown land tenure, that would not be city ownership of the land. It would still be Crown land. What this tenure means is it is a right to use the land for a limited set of purposes, which in this case is those purposes that Don set out. It would be work on some of the existing trails, establishing trailhead markers and cultural signage. It would be the establishment of parking lot. And as you can see in there, it's not a particularly large lot relative to the size of the site, as well as the establishment of a disc golf course, which would be like minor removal of vegetation around the baskets. And it is really designed as a very low intensive scheme, but it is not city ownership. It's not control. We don't have the right to do anything you want on it. It's very limited and restricted as it stands. And if the time were to come in the future through the form of a neighborhood development plan where the community as a whole, council as a whole, and neighboring First Nations were supportive of any further development or project on that site, that's when that would be advanced. But for right now, I really want council to be crystal clear that we don't, this is not ours by virtue of this application.
And we're not looking at housing there at this point. Okay. I thought I saw somebody else. Okay. Seeing no other comments, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. We move now to new business, 9.1, the 2022 capital budget, early approval of projects. And Mr. Anderson, the staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. What I'm presenting today is some items that are for 2022 capital early approval. As presented at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting last week, there was a number of items presented in November of 2021, early November, for early consideration, which were going to go to a council meeting on November 23rd of last year, which of course didn't happen, and our financial planning activities were put on hold. So what we have done as a management group here and presented to Finance and Audit last week was a listing of specific projects that if we can get some early approval ahead of the budget for this year so that we can get working on some of these things. Some of them will require RFPs to go out, and some of them require work in the spring and summer months. So the earlier that they can be approved, the sooner we can get onto these projects. The next meeting where we will be talking about the 2022 and beyond financial plan is April 19th, and that'll be the first sort of presentation of the draft plan. And May 13th is the date that we need to submit the final 2022-2026 financial plan and tax rate bylaw. So in between April 19th and May 13th, a lot of meetings and back and forth discussion, and we'll get into these in detail. This is just a listing of specific items totaling just over $1 million for early approval on capital. Just prior to this meeting today, we found out that we will not get $35,000 in grant funding for those two items that are listed here on page 2. So we will likely be revising the recommendation here at some point during the evening.
That's for the street tree enhancements and parklet improvements?
That is correct, yes. Those have not been approved for the grant funding that we had hoped for. I do have with me tonight the Directors of Development Services, Fire, and Public Works, so they can speak to any of these in any detail if you would like. So on page 2 is a list of 2022 projects, and we have gone fairly light on these projects because we're uncertain about how much we are going to have to put forward for disaster financial assistance projects, that 20% that the city would be on the hook for if we don't receive additional funding, things like bridge replacements and so forth. So we have not gone really big with any of the 2022 capital projects beyond even these ones that are early. We've pushed a number of them out into 2023. With the hope that if we do get funding through disaster financial assistance or other funding opportunities that are out there, that maybe we can bring some of those 2023 projects back into 2022. The list here, and I won't go through them in detail, but there is explanations on them on page 2 and 3. Administration, we're looking at things like computer infrastructure. That's just our general annual spending for replacement of computer assets. The asset management system, phase 1, is a software product that'll help us to track our assets as we look to replace them in the future, making sure that we've got the information related to asset retirement obligations, which is an accounting standard that's come out in 2022 that will need to be complied with by the end of 2022. So we need to get an asset management system in place. And later, when we talk about staffing, there is a resource requirement for that system as well. So that's on the administration side, $162,000 there. On development services, we've got roughly about $100,000 for city center revitalization. That's a carry forward from prior year. So we spent roughly about $500 in the past, and that's helping us with sort of downtown revitalization. We had in there, again, street tree enhancements, parklet improvements for a total of $134,000. And Don MacArthur can speak to the need for that roughly $134,000 in spending for downtown. I'll just go through the list here, and then if we can open it up to the floor here. Structure protection unit, $207,000 is a unit that's used in a wildfire situation to protect homes in the area. That's something that can be leased out or rented out, if you like, to other communities in a wildfire situation, so we can recoup some of our cost over time, even if there isn't a wildfire that's impacting merit. Wildfire fire equipment, $27,500 is for the 2022 wildfire season here. We need to replace some equipment, and we need to get those purchases done sooner rather than later. Public Works Cemetery expansion is the second phase of our expansion project, which includes the relocation of the columbarium to its new location. Also landscaping and other costs associated with that. We were under budget on phase 1 and hope to be under this budget on phase 2 as well, but Charlie is here to speak to that. Asphalt overlay program is quite a bit higher than prior years, and it's higher because we initially back in November of last year had thought that we were going to put in Vote Street phase 2 from Blackwell up to Grimmett. For a cost of roughly $3.6 million. So we have backed that out just to conserve for 2022 and moved it off into 2023. There may be opportunity to bring that back into 2022, but if we don't do that, we definitely need to do some asphalt overlay on Vote Street and other areas. This is not all Vote Street. Roughly about half of it would be related to Vote Street repaving efforts. Wastewater treatment plant lab equipment is outdated and it needs to be replaced. It was heavily used and continues to be heavily used, so we've got $25,000 in equipment there. The Nicola lift station upgrades, that Nicola lift station is causing some issues with alarms and those sort of things that result in call-outs and overtime, so we want to make sure we get that updated as well. The condenser replacement for recreation facilities, that was previously brought forward, and we have sent out the RFP, and I believe we've received back some responses on that already, so we're just reviewing those responses. So the total, including those two that we thought were grant funded, excluding the condenser, is 1.1 million, 1127007. So is there any questions at this point for Charlie, Don, or Fire Chief with regards to the projects that they've put forward?
So council, any questions for any one of our managers, directors, I mean? Doesn't look like we have questions now. There appears to be a lot of things that we didn't get a chance to do. And I just want to say thank you to the finance department. They were ready to go with last year's budget and have it approved. And we were looking at a whole different scenario back before the flood. And this has taken a lot of work to redo it all and bring it back again. And there's a time crunch for you as well. I'm aware of that. But thank you and your staff for getting it done and for ensuring it will be done by May 15th. So,
thank you, Mary. Yeah, there are deadlines that we need to hit, and we cannot move those deadlines. So we are moving full steam ahead. As I mentioned, 2023 capital. There's roughly about $9 million sitting in 2023 as we've moved things forward. We're not likely going to put through a $9 million budget for 2023. We will move those things, spread them out through 2024 to 2026. But we had a lot of things that we needed to move off into 2023. So
and
the risks of...
If I can interrupt for a while, that is in addition to any grant funding that we get for housing on the recovery team. So that will be additional outside of this budget.
Exactly, yes. The amounts that I quote here are amounts that don't even take into account the recovery operations projects that are going to be underway in 2022 and 2023. So the risk of not approving this at this time is some of this work is not going to get done in the spring and summer, where it could be done more efficiently, probably for better prices. And some statutory deadlines that we need to hit, as mentioned on the asset management system. We have to get tracking those asset retirement obligations as soon as possible. And there is a possibility that getting some of these things in place, like the structure protection unit, will allow us to generate some revenue in 2022.
And Chief, could you speak to that for just a moment?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Can I ask you to take your mask off and shout?
Here's my face. Nobody's seen it for 2 years. But,
Thank you.
I know. Good thing I brushed my teeth. When we put forward the structure protection unit, the intent isn't that we are renting it out to every community at a whim, but there is the opportunity to recoup some dollars if we put it on the list with the province. If we looked at 2021 fire season, quite likely it would have been used and generated quite a bit of revenue. Just generally, if we were to deploy the SPU unit or the structure protection unit without a crew, we could be looking at $3,600 per day. With a crew, upwards of $7,000 a day in revenue that could be recouped. So that ability is there, but the reality is that we would like it in our community to assist ourselves as well as our adjacent neighbors and look at more of a regional approach to structure protection and wildfire protection within the valley.
Any questions for the chief?
No.
No?
It wasn't for that.
Okay,
It was for budget.
thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Richard.
Well, my question that I had was, in the recommendations that we have, are we going to reword the options to remove the street enhancements in the parklet then? Since we didn't get the funding? Because I noticed that we have to consider the options, and option 1 has the, if we have to reword that now so that we can vote.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Chart, the option would be to change it to either include both of them to be funded through reserves, or to remove them and not include them in the discussion. So they could stay in there, but they would just need to be funded through reserves versus grants.
Would you like to make that motion? Move that motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
That council provide approval in advance of the adoption of the 2022-2026 financial plan for staff to proceed with the procurement of $1,127,007 in capital projects for 2022, with $1,092,007 to be funded through reserves. For all of it to be funded through reserves.
Yeah.
To be funded through reserves. I need a seconder. Christopherson, okay, and Councillor White, do you have other things to say?
No.
Okay.
So we're carrying on with the 35,000, is that it?
It currently is included in the lump sum. It's part of the 127.
Your Worship,
Yes.
So as I understand it, and as I've recorded it moving forwards, the motion moved was that council provide approval in advance of the adoption of 2022 to 2026 financial plan for staff to proceed with the procurement of $1,127,007 in capital projects for 2022 to be funded through reserves.
Without mention of any other number, like I had said.
The functional equipment.
That would be all of the projects that are on the sheet, all of them to come from city reserves.
Including the $35,000?
Yes.
Yes.
You okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you want to speak to it? Anybody else want to speak to it? Okay, I'll ask a question. Did you have a question, Councillor? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Okay. So we can move on now To 9.2, approval of 2022 grant and aid operations, to be introduced by Mr. Anderson. And are you going to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This I will introduce our interim financial services manager, Norman Thompson. Norman's worked through the 2022 grant and aid applications, sort of picked up on those and carried them forward here for you this evening. So we've got those that we can present, and I believe we've got attachments that we can link to for the applications themselves. And there are some people in the audience here today that would likely want to speak to some of these. So I'm going to pass it over to Norman, and Greg will run the slideshow here with the spreadsheet, and we can just go through them one by one.
Oh.
Third time. It's the LG. There we go.
So the total funding for the grant and aid is, we've got a budget of $50,000, and all the applicants that have, we have 16 applicants that have asked for $40,228, and which would leave a council contingency fund of $9,771. And so as we look at this, of the 40,000 that was requested, 35,680 is for financial aid, and 4,548 is for in-kind use of the Civic Center, the parking lot for Bailey House, and for the ice rink. So as we go through this, we've got three, the Nicola Valley Skating Club that we'll ask Kurt to recuse himself from. The Nicola Nordic Ski Club, we'll ask Councillor Furr to recuse himself, and Community Futures Development Corporation of Nicola Valley will ask Councillor Luck to recuse himself for. So we'll go through the ones that everybody's going to be voting on first. And so we'll start with the Merit Breadbasket Bowl Society, and they are asking for $1,500 out of their total budget for a community weekly food program and soup kitchen, budget of $22,881 plus donations of food from No Frills and Save On that they collect on a weekly basis.
Are we going to look at these one at a time?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments, questions, concerns with the soup bowl kitchen? Seeing none?
Your Worship, I just wanted to make sure, if you don't want to consider them one at a time, we will take direction from you. Otherwise, what we're saying is we are prepared to do that. So your call as Mayor,
Great.
Your Worship, and
Good.
Council.
Thank you. So can we do groups of them? Can we do the first three? Can you go through the other two, hospice and snowmobile?
Okay. The Meritten District Hospice Society are asking for $1,500 out of their program budget of $3,750, and they are training volunteers and looking after the hospice of members of our community. They also want to upgrade their computer and printer, but the main is assisting with training their volunteers. And 2021, they were given a grant, but they did not use it due to COVID. The Merit Snowmobile Club is looking to get several avalanche beaker purchased and installed at their two main riding areas so that the riders can check their avalanche beacons, make sure they're working before they go out into the areas. And they're requesting $4,000. And the program is going to be $19,270.
can we skip over the conflicts and do all of them at once? And if there's any questions, council can speak to them, and then we'll approve them all in one lump, other than the conflict ones.
The Nicola Valley Community Band, they bring music to the residents at local functions, and their annual budget includes purchase of music, room rentals, office supplies, etc. And they didn't get the grant last year, but they're asking for $1,500 this year out of their total budget of $4,780. The Nicola Valley Evangelical Free Church has a Kingdom Youth group that meets weekly and year-round to build friendships and volunteer in the community to help elders with shoveling the snow off their sidewalks and other areas around the community. They requested $1,500 out of their program of $4,000. Any questions on those three?
Don't see any. They got to be quick, or we're not gonna.
Nicola Valley Community Garden Society, they have a community harvest support program, and they're asking for $4,680 out of a program budget of $26,000. They want to enlarge the edible landscaping area and incorporate the irrigation into the space for automatic sprinkler systems. The Nicola Valley Community Arts Council have a talent promotion project where they create videos to promote 10 local artisans on the YouTube channel. And so they're asking for $2,500 out of their budget of $5,000. The Merritt Senior Citizens Association is looking for $7,500 out of their budget of $11,000. They've been unable to run bingos for fundraising, so we're asking for funding to provide programming for seniors. The Merritt Little Britches Rodeo is asking for $1,000 out of their program budget of $14,000. And the Merritt Little Britches Rodeo will be held at the Merritt Rodeo Grounds with 17 different events for the young kids on June 4th and 5th. The Merritt High School Rodeo is going to be held at the Merritt Rodeo Grounds with 35 different events for the high school youth on May 14th and 15th. They're asking for $1,000 out of their $19,000 program budget. The Nicola Valley Rodeo Association wants to repair the caretaker residence. Some critical maintenance is required to the caretaker's residence, in particular replacement of a leaking roof. And so they're asking for $7,500 out of their $20,000 program budget. The Merritt Dance Society has a year-end dance recital. They're hoping to use the Civic Center on June 16th. And so they're asking for in kind of $1,279. They had a grant last year but did not use the Civic Center due to COVID. And the Nicola Valley Farmers Market Association has a weekly farmers market to provide produce, crafts, and baking on a weekly basis. And they use the parking lot beside Bailey House, and so they're asking for an in-kind of $1,100.
Okay, and can somebody move that these grant and aid requests be approved? And second? Etchart and Luck, Fair. And anyone want to speak to any of them? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None. Councillor Christopherson? Did I rush you?
Well, I wasn't really sure how to go about asking. Because two of the requests are fairly substantial, and one of them, $7,500 is out of a total budget of $11,000, which seems a fairly substantial portion of that budget. I don't question the other one because it's not the same amount. It's out of a $20,000 budget, and for something that's I think legitimately needed. But I do have questions about
Do we have anyone here from the Merritt Senior Citizens Association?
Your Worship?
Yes?
I am not.
Speak up.
You'll soon be there, Sky. You'll soon be there.
Yeah, I'd just like some clarification on it.
Yeah, Your Worship, this is a group of individuals that everyone was impacted by COVID. This association, this group was drastically affected. They battened down the hatches. They followed every PHO order to the T, and then some. And a lot of their members are just now starting to ask questions about coming out of the woodwork as well. So yeah, financially, they were very, very handcuffed and very limited to what they could pull off for any kind of fundraising, of which they are usually very active with their teas and activities and all their stretching classes, as well as bingo, which is just starting up now, which has been gone for a long time. And so, yeah, they were severely impacted. That number definitely approaches what they run for a budget, but it's accumulated. And they try to keep up on their maintenance of their lease of their building. They try to ensure that they replace shuffleboard items, pool cues, stuff like that, that are of small cost, but definitely add up when you start replacing them over the years. So again, just vouching for that their circumstance was a little greater than a lot of these other associations that were able to do other fundraisers and work around. They were definitely limited.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for your time.
And
Yeah,
Councillor Christopherson, did you want to redo the vote at this point?
No, I appreciate the information that we got. I'm not sure if I should recuse myself, you know, being a senior citizen myself, but no, I'm satisfied with both answers, so thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to clarify it.
I'll give you a little more time the next time. And
So, I know this, but just for the avoidance of any doubt then, to confirm the vote on that was unanimous, all in favour?
yes.
Thank you.
So now we're looking at, we've got 3 recusals here. So we'll start with the Nicola Nordic Ski Club. Oh, that's Councillor Fair.
So, thanks.
Thank you. I will recuse as a member of the Board of Directors of the Nicola Nordic Ski Club.
Thank you. Nope, not unless you're part of the Nordic Ski Club. Okay. Mr. Thompson?
So the Nicola Nordic Ski Club want to replace and repair map signage infrastructure. It's a 25-year-old map enclosures that is sorely in need of replacement. And they also used some of the funds for printing trail brochures. So their program budget is $4,100 and they're requesting $1,500.
And I also believe that Linda Brown is your treasurer that has signed the report. That's not me. That's the other Linda Brown. Just, I want to clarify that. That is not me.
Did I have people calling for your head?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and all in favor? Oh, we don't. Oh, we're asking for, yeah. Oh, I see.
This is actually the third one, the category C on the attached Schedule A.
I'll move category C. Is that the C one?
Yeah.
That's C? Okay. All in favor? Oh, we need a seconder, sorry. Oh, Councillor Etchart, second?
No,
Oh.
I had mine on for a comment from earlier, but it's kind of a moot point now.
Can you hold that point then just for a second? And I need a seconder for the Nordic Ski Club. Christopherson? And anyone want to speak to this one? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. And I'm going to ask you for that moot comment. before we go any further. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize that I hadn't asked you. No comment?
Well, no, before we had the vote, I was just saying that I know that the one limit that we had for the 7,500 when Sky was up was to add to that was just that in that small space, the amount of activities that they do and how badly they were impacted, they really stretched the dollars out of the senior center. And even though it's one of the larger amounts for the budget, I didn't feel that it was a lot considering how much they do out of the senior center, out of that space. I don't know if you've been in there recently, but the last time we had an event, any kind of activity there was a lot that happened and how much they get done out of that space right beside the museum. And it's a lot of activity that happens for that amount of money for a lot of our residents that don't have a lot of comments anyway, that we hear about anyway. Thanks.
Thank you. And we're looking at community futures. Can you just say it into the mic, please?
Director on the board.
Thank you. We'll wait for Councillor Locke to leave the room. And the report, Mr. Thompson.
So Community Futures Development Corporation of Nicola Valley are asking for $1,225 in kind for use of the Civic Center in June or September for their second annual nonprofit community engagement. They couldn't put it on last year due to COVID, and they were approved for in-kind donation last year, but did not use it up. And so their total budget of $4,775, and so they're requesting that $1,225.
And do we have a mover? And seconder? Christofferson, fair. And anyone have questions or comments on this one? It's an in-kind for the Civic Center. All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. And we should let Councillor Luck back in. I don't think I did that with Councillor Fair, but. And now we've got the Nicola Valley Skating Club. Councillor Christofferson.
Yeah, my daughter's on the executive, so I'll recuse myself.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Thompson.
The Nicola Valley Skating Club is wanting to hold a year-end ice show, so they're asking for an in-kind donation of $945 out of their total budget of $1,645. And the year-end ice show is to show the skills of club members, and they're asking for in-kind use of the ice rink arena on March 11th and 12th.
Ooh, that's coming up. And anyone want to speak to this at all? Seeing none, all in favor? Do we need a motion? Councillor Luck and Etchart. And now, any comments? All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Thank you. I just had a question for Councillor Christofferson. Is Country Christmas happening this year?
It's planning on happening in November, quite a while, but it's not down here because it had the grant approved for last year and the event didn't happen, so they've carried it over for the next year.
Okay.
So was recommended we didn't reapply.
And there's a fundraiser coming for Hell or High Water on March 13th. Is that happening at the Civic Center as well? No. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. We did explore the option, but in discussion with the event organizers, the thought was that there might be a better opportunity, given the restrictions that are in place right now, for a more lively and engaging event as a follow-up to the actual fundraiser.
Okay. Thank you.
And you have one more motion?
Do we have one more motion? Okay. Remaining funds? Or?
Yeah, I'll move the motion.
Thank you. That council move any remaining funds in the grant and aid provisions of the 2022 draft budget to council contingency to provide funding for other requests that may come up during the year. Okay, that was Luck and Christofferson. And any comments, concerns? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Now we move to the 9.3 2022 staffing plan and Mr. Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. The report here tonight is the 2022 staffing plan with the request to adopt in advance of the 2022-2026 financial plan the addition of 4 new positions in 2022, 2 temporary and 2 permanent ones, along with changes in position types across multiple departments. So we'll go through this, and it was gone through in some detail at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting as well, the changes proposed for 2022. So in 2021, we had 98 employees within the city with an equivalent of 74.51 FTEs. Now, an FTE is based on somebody hired as of January 1st. For example, if they were a part-time employee working a 50% shift, they would be a 0.50 FTE, regardless of when they may be hired in the year. So from a budget perspective, we may not budget 74.51 FTEs, or in 2021 we didn't, because we knew that there were some vacancies in some positions and we would budget at a lesser amount. But to keep it apples to apples, comparing year over year, it's based on a person being in a position for a full year.
Can I interrupt for a sec?
Yeah, go ahead.
That 74.51 was our budgeted FTE amount for 2021?
It was not the budgeted amount. It was the actual amount, assuming that every position was filled for the entire year. Okay. So we budgeted less than 74.51.
At the time the budget was created, what we say that, I'm just going to make one point. Yeah. We say that because you will note that some of the ones that are in the 2022 staffing plan, such as the additional building inspector, as well as the building, second building clerk that we have, were actually 2021 positions when we'd come to you saying, alert, we need extra help. We're getting inundated with applications. So that was the estimate, as Wayne indicated, at the time the budget took place. But there was additions in 2021 that are now represented in 2022.
Yeah, thank you.
The numbers that we're representing today exclude any positions in relation to the Recovery Operations Center at this time. So the full effect of these 4 positions, it's a 4.05 FTE across the following departments. So if you look at the chart on page 2, you can see additions and removals. If somebody moved off the sort of regular operations into the recovery, they may show as a removal, but they are going to be added into the recovery numbers. So, for example, in finance. Norman has been added in, and he's replacing somebody that's been removed off to the recovery team. So it's not like there's been that many removals and so forth. It's just how we're representing it here. So in 2022, 4 positions not included in the 2021 financial plan, as Mr. Smith mentions. We've got an arena casual position, and I do have Sky McEwen here tonight as well too, because he does have a number of changes in aquatics and so forth that he can speak to. But we've got a net FTE increase of a 0.34 position for the arena, making sure that we've got sufficient backup to meet our safety requirements. The 2 development services positions, these are ones that were added in 2021 after we had completed the plan. As mentioned, we have a development services clerk to assist with the volume of work in that department, and also a building inspector level 3, which is required for a number of the inspections that we need to do, and that person is mentoring our level 1 inspector. In finance, the request is for a full-time temp position, a 9-month term position to assist with the implementation of the asset management software. So that would be an add for 2022, and then once that project is completed, that contract would be ended at that point. Position changes by department on page 3. So due to workload and staff scheduling issues and so forth, Public Works, Aquatics, and Finance, we're proposing some changes. Then these changes, for example, in Public Works, we removed 2 seasonal positions with an equivalent of 1.24 FTEs, and we've added a full-time shop tech and a full-time parks position. So those were seasonal employees that have now been moved in to assist with the volume of work in our shop, and also to make that parks position a full-time annual position as well. Charlie could speak to those if you have questions on those 2. On the aquatic side, we've reduced the casual workforce and added in a full-time lifeguard and a part-time lifeguard. And that helps the aquatic side with scheduling and so forth, to have a couple of more employees that are part-time and full-time.
Can I ask the question? If we reduced the casuals plural, is it equivalent to the 1.0, or have we topped it up with a different piece?
On the aquatic side, we reduced 1.4 on the casual side, and we've added in 1.5 on the part-time and full-time. So it's fairly net neutral. So you've reduced the casual complement, but increased the full-time and part-time.
Thank you.
On finance, we have 1 full-time clerk. We have more than 1 full-time clerk, but we've got 1 of the full-time clerks and 1 of the casuals, and we're creating 2 part-time positions. So we're going from a 1.2 FTE complement to a 1.4 FTE by going to 2.7 positions from a 1 and a 0.2. So lots of ins and outs there. Would you like to speak to Sky or Charlie with regards to any of the changes in Public Works or in Recreation?
Anybody have any questions for staff? Councillor White?
The staff that are in the recovery operations right now, how long are they going to be there? Or how long is recovery operation going to be there?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor White. It's a good question. Our funding that we've applied for to date is really looking at this being a one-year position. So most of our documentation to date has us running through till December 31st, 2022. Some of those positions, depending on the nature of the role, may come off earlier than that. Some of them may end up running longer than that, depending on the nature of the position. So for example, I think it likely that the person we have that's assisting with environmental items and issues right now may be one that comes off earlier, whereas I think the person that's driving housing projects may come off later. But we are still working with the people who are providing funding to determine that. And as it stands right now, through response dollars, through EMBC, that's what's covering the cost of the team that's there currently. And we have applications in to transition that to more of a long-term model that would bridge us through the rest of the year. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to.
Yeah, so the permanent staff from the city that are now in the recovery operations, are they coming back to the city as full-time employees?
Yes. Each of those people, without getting into the specific HR components of it, they all retain rights over that position, but we also have the right, and we've got Norman here to thank for it. He's the result of one of those folks who's gone over to backfill their positions for the duration of that term. So they will be coming back. I don't want to give a firm date because, like I said, it's going to depend on the circumstances and how long the need is there, but they do still hold their positions.
So then I guess my question at this point is, if that's the case and we really don't know what's going on, the full-time employees that want to be hired now, why can't we contract that out until we do know what's going on?
The full-time employees that want to be...
The full-time employees that we want to hire now, why can they not be contracted employees until our other employee, till we know what's going on with all our recovery and...
So I should be clear. These employees that we're bringing on, and I apologize, Norman, I'm making a bit of an example of you tonight. Norman is structured as a full-time temporary employee, so he is a contract employee and will be there for as long as we've got him. And again, we don't have certainty on what the timeline for the merger is going to bring it back in, but they are contract employees. Is that not what you were asking?
The employees that's in this ask here?
So let's just quickly go through them. So the development services clerk you guys have right now is a full-time temporary position. So that is, it has an end date towards the end of this year. The part-time building inspector was a permanent position. The finance position that Wayne is talking about to fulfill the asset management and the asset retirement obligation requirements is a temporary position. So much of the FTE that you see on here, in fact, 1.75 of that FTE would be temporary. Is that correct with what?
1.75 was temporary. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So 2.3 of the additional 4.05 that we're adding is the permanent.
The very bottom of page 3 shows the 1.75 temporary.
And if I can also add, the ROC is a department basically of the city. The employees that are there are being paid by an outside body, but our employees are, the ones that have transferred over, retaining their rights, are still employees working for another area, just getting paid from a different area.
We have it structured as a bit of a mix right now for full disclosure for council. Some of the even new folks that we've brought on, for example, our recovery manager is a city employee, despite the fact that it's a temporary position. Some of them are structured as contractors, depends on the nature of the role.
But they're still, the ROC reports to the CAO.
No, I understand that. I understand that.
When we bring forward the budget in April, we will have a split between, we'll have the ROC listed as well. At this point, we don't want to muddy the waters between last year and this year. We're showing sort of regular operations staffing, but we will definitely be presenting the ROC number of employees, cost of that operation when we bring that forward in April.
Councillor Etchart.
I know that in finance, when we reviewed some of this stuff, the way it comes out with the FTEs so that it works for this year with the development and at the aquatic center by having the full-time position, so it makes it easier for staffing. So instead of having a casual, we have scheduled so that we have the coverage to operate. And that's how I understood it. And it had a net savings because by having the full-time here with the benefits paid out instead of in lieu with casual, it ended up being cheaper. That's the understanding we had at the finance meeting when we discussed it anyway. So to me, it makes sense to proceed this way, and that's why, because we had looked over the numbers and reviewed it.
Okay. Did you still have another question? Okay.
So just to wrap it up on the final page there, we've had a huge increase in workload over the last 4 months, 3 months. And as a result, demands in different areas, even in 2021 with development services and all of the applications that have been brought forward have been really pulled in all different directions. So that's two of the main positions that are listed in this 4 here. We did the best as a group of directors and managers to minimize any additions. I mean, we're very cognizant of the fact that we are in a tight budget year, and we have done our best to make sure that we're streamlining processes and looking at every position within the organization. And we still have time between now and April 19th to go through again and take a look at this. But this is kind of where we're at, and this what we're hoping to bring forward for April 19th. And it will allow us to get these positions advertised and filled and help us meet our strategic priorities for 2022, which there will be many of. So that's just to wrap it up. And the request as presented is for those 4 positions.
Any other questions for Mr. Anderson? Seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder that council provide approval in advance of the adoption of the 2022-2026 financial plan for the addition of 4 new positions in 2022, 2 temporary and 2 permanent, along with changes in positions across multiple departments. Christofferson? HR? Anybody want to speak to this? All in favor? Opposed? 1. White. Okay. And I lost my agenda. Okay. 9.4, Claybanks RV Park Site Master Plan, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. And before I start here, I am going to note that Sky McEwen is available for the more technical components if there's questions particular around insurance, because he's the one that's been working heavily with the insurer in relation to these projects. So with that, we'll hop right to it. Our recommendation to council today is that council direct staff to establish a site master plan for the Claybanks parcels at 1301 and 1302 Vote Street, subject to receiving grant funding for the master plan. And if Greg, would you be willing to pull up the site plan? Perfect. So when we say 1301, we are talking about the previously vacant portion, and 1302 is the Claybanks RV Park. I don't even want to say former, it sounds dirty, but the site is the Claybanks RV Park. And so as it stands, the Claybanks RV Park was significantly damaged during the November floods. For those of you who have had the opportunity to look at what is there currently, the answer is nothing. There's very little that is still there, with the exception of the bathrooms, which were damaged and are now stripped and gutted, as well as some damage to the caretaker home that is on the premises. The perimeter fencing, the recreation center that was there previously, service lines, so water, sewer, electricity, as well as some land loss on the parcel. So it looks different than the RV park that you know and love. We're at a position right now where we need to make some decisions as to what goes back. We are going to be covered for rebuilding Claybanks RV Park, which is excellent news, with the asterisks on this that it would be subject to some policy limitations. And the important notation here is the grass, plants, trees, and shrubs category, because we have general coverage for the entire city in that category of 100,000. And given the areas that were hit so hard, so we could take dog park, Vote Park, Centennial Park, Claybanks RV Park, and others, we're going to exceed the 100,000 in that category. So when I say that we will be covered, know that we're probably going to run short in that particular policy limitation. And I'm always nervous when I'm talking about anything insurance because I know that a certain member of council knows far more about this subject than I do. So the city will continue to receive coverage for income loss from the property through June 2022 in case that affects council's decisions in this process. So where we stand right now, staff is proposing that we take a step back, and part of the reason we're saying that is because we're also still conducting the floodplain and diking plan, and so this could be done somewhat concurrently with that. And our concern is that if we were to substantially rebuild Claybanks RV Park in the same form, what happens if the diking plan doesn't align well with that? Are we throwing good money after bad? And so allowing council the opportunity to design what Claybanks RV Park could and should look like for the future. And what other uses could potentially be looped into those designs, as well as making sure that we look at this as a whole project, both sides of the street, to make sure that this is going to be the best community asset for years to come. And the reason we say that is because the majority of both of these parcels, with the exception of the portion that you will note on 1301 in the northern section there, that is park, the rest is all zoned C2. And the C2 has a much more broad list of uses, thanks to, I'm going to say, kudos to the foresight of Development Services for the work they did here, because this does allow us to, we feel, re-envision this site, hopefully preserving the RV park use, and we'll explain not only why we think that continues to make sense, but from an insurance perspective, if you want to get full coverage for this, you're gonna need to restore the RV park, even if it's not in the same configuration. That use should be part of this plan. But uses on the property can include things ranging from the campground use to brewing and distilling, commercial recreation, entertainment facilities, food primary, liquor primary, gallery and museum, potentially hotel, motel, participant recreation services, indoor and outdoor. And so really has the opportunity for a broad use of uses. Would have redone that one if I could have restarted the sentence. That really encourage both recreation, tourism, and community use. And so we feel that this might be a chance to explore how we can maximize that parcel. And while we are in the process of building up safety measures that will protect the community, how do we also make this a very strong recreation and tourism asset for our community? We are particularly supportive of this because from preliminary conversations with the provincial government, it does sound, it's not a done deal. I want to be clear with that, but it sounds very promising that we would be able to get funding to be able to do the master plan for this site. And so we're proposing this as the option that council take. You'll note that there's a list of pros and cons for two separate options in this plan. I will say that there are cons associated with this approach that council should be mindful of. I've talked about some of the pros, but in terms of cons, this potentially could be a site that the faster you get it on board, it may be able to be used to help support flood impacted residents, and I don't want to minimize the importance of that. There will likely be reduced direct revenues and tourism interest as a result of delayed reopening with this site if we were to go that route. And this is a shout out for the operators of the site. We have really strong contracted operator in place right now, and delayed reopening may increase their need to have to look for another opportunity. I don't want to, the writing isn't on the wall there by any means, and Sky's working with them to make sure that we can hopefully continue to have a strong relationship moving forward, but those are potential cons to look at if we weren't to proceed with rebuilding. And that kind of leads into the second option, if council wanted to consider it, is that council could look at proceeding with rebuilding the Claybanks RV Park and park, and then just creating a plan for the 1301 Vote Street parcel, the historically vacant parcel, and not really integrate those two plans. It does address most of the cons of the previous option. You can probably get it open sooner as a result of that. The drawback is that we don't know exactly what that floodplain plan is going to look like yet. And again, that good money after bad idea, as well as you have a little bit less flexibility in planning if you're only looking at one parcel with two, if you're trying to create a really unique tourism opportunity. So with that, I will defer to council if you have any questions.
Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, I need a mover and a second to move one of the motions. That council directs staff to establish a site master plan for the Claybank parcels at 1301 and 1302 Vote Street, subject to receiving grant funding for the master plan. And are there any discussions? Councillor Fair.
Thank you. I want to speak to this because I think it's very important at this point to recognize that the decision we make may affect displaced Maritonians and their ability to return home sooner. And that's what makes this decision a difficult one, because I think that the pros of looking into a master plan are very clear, and I think they represent what the reality of what we mean when we say building back better. So I think what we need is to know that the support for the people who are still displaced will be continuing. So I don't know if there's any way to get that assurance. I think what we've seen so far is that it is there. So that's what I'm considering with this decision, and that's what makes it so difficult. But I think in the long term, we need to be proactive and consider how we redevelop what's been damaged in the mind frame of resiliency for the future.
Thank you. And I'm not sure who's next.
Mr. Smith, I think he wants to rebuttal.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Fair. I really want to especially acknowledge, I think it's a fantastic point you're making right now. Because we didn't have Claybanks RV to be able to direct people to at the outset, I wanted to give credit to the ROC team. Andrew Nielsen in particular, our housing coordinator, has worked to find solutions for people with RVs, whether this is on their existing properties or through Diamond Vale Trailer Park or others, to make sure that those who have this asset that can take advantage of that have a comfortable place to be. To date, we haven't been inundated, like we're not over capacity with those opportunities. So I can't guarantee what the future is going to look like. Maybe some more of these folks will find that, they're borrowing a friend's RV or whatever that is, and we could grow to the spot where we could run out of capacity, particularly in circumstances if we're successful bringing in the plan that we've talked about on a number of different instances now, mobile homes that would fill vacant parcels within Diamond Vale Trailer Park. It could reduce the capacity for RVs. You just have to think that that's probably also being offset by those individuals who need housing and would be getting it through the mobile homes. So I will say that I don't have perfect vision, and I won't be able to absolutely guarantee that this will have no impact. What I can say is we are absolutely working outside of having this asset available to take care of individuals and support individuals who may benefit from staying in RVs and still being in our community. So we're working through that, despite the fact I can't say for sure that there's nobody that would be better off if we weren't to proceed right now.
Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, one of the challenges I think we're facing here in the city right now is dropping everything else long-term to get the media taken care of. And that's a real challenge for the city. And nothing's mutually exclusive as we move forward again. So I think we do have to be, and that's why I supported, thank you, Councillor Christophers, for moving it to one. Sometimes we have to take maybe a bit of a step backwards to move forward, because the long-range plan, that's exactly what we want for that area. And it will be a challenge, you know, not having immediate needs, and how much longer would it be from actually going through the plan and doing it through option one will it be before we could get some people in there? And I'm not sure about that, but I think it's really important for everybody in the community, and ourselves included, and that is to look that none of this is mutually exclusive. We got to continue the business of the city as we move forward, think of the long-term plans for the city and getting these things done as well. And it is a challenge. We've got to be able to find housing for the people that are displaced here. But I think, you know, we had a letter, you know, about water meters, and why are we looking at that? Well, it's not mutually exclusive. We can't just do this without looking at all the business of the city. And so this really dramatizes the importance of moving everything forward as best we can, juggling everything to move the city forward as we recover from this, from the flooding as well. So that's why I supported option one as well. Thank you.
Councillor Richard.
A lot of my comments were discussed already by comments made already, but sometimes when you have an event like this is your opportunity to explore all the options, and I think that we really need to take advantage of this opportunity right now. We could use the space by opening up Claybanks sooner, but like Councillor Luck says, we also have to look towards the future and expand our opportunities, especially since we have this piece of land that isn't used right now, and we can look, you know, for future tourist seasons and pieces to really have it on both sides of the bridge and street to make sure that it's well utilized and developed properly. So I support the first option by going for the master plan. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
I also, Councillor Luck made a point there. To put the Claybanks back together, by the time we get it back together, and it's only going to be temporary housing for people until they, and hopefully by that time we'll have some other solutions for them. I don't know how many units Claybanks holds, but you know, how many people have even trailers or campers or whatever to put in there?
Yeah, I will say, and I think this kind of harkens back to Councillor Fair's comments, our read collectively is that the impact is going to be more on tourism than it is the actual flood affected residents by not getting this open in time. Will this potentially affect people's ability to stay in other sites when the festivals come to town and some of these other opportunities, when we have softball tournaments and things like that? There will be impacts, and I don't want to undersell those in any way, where the sooner we get it up would be better. I just think that, and this is what I was going and having a quick conversation with Sky about, even if we were to proceed with doing this because of the need to do earthworks and redo the utility lines, it's not like this would be up in the next few months anyways. Right. It's not a short order issue. So even if you get it up sooner, it's not necessarily going to be the big pivotal win for flood affected residents. So I raised that as a potential flag for you, because I feel like we have to touch on those points when we're talking about these types of issues. But I think that the greater impact is probably more on the tourism side than it is on the flood affected residents.
And again, even if we had put it into an RV park, we may end up looking at the floodplain and saying, no, we don't want it there. You have another question?
No, I just want to say I I do support looking into, looking at the opportunities for that property, because maybe, land uses change and alter in best use, and maybe that's not even the best use for that property for the city. So I support looking into the other alternatives.
Okay, I see no further comments. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, none. Carried. And we're getting close to the end. 9.5, 2022 conference attendance. Mr. Lois.
Thank you, Your Worship. This one is hopefully going to be fairly brief. So obviously there are a number of conferences, training opportunities, etc., which are available to you as elected members, and attached to this agenda item we have the conference attendance policy, which is adopted by Council. You all have seats available to you at the UBCM and the SILGA meetings, should they return to in-person attendance, which is currently anticipated for both of those this year. But that's not the case for all of them. In particular, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, that is available for the mayor and one councillor. And there are also other opportunities which are available, and the policy states that if you wish to take advantage of those, you require a resolution of council. So we're bringing this forward to ask if any of you wish to take the available seat at the FCM conference in Regina, Saskatchewan on June 2nd to 5th. And also if you have any other conferences, training workshops, etc., that you wish to attend this year, which would require a council resolution.
I believe we had a council resolution somewhere in 2018 that adjusted our FCM complement. I thought we had actually changed policy. That we said up to 2.
That's what we love to hear as staff, Your Worship.
I know, I know. I think that was before your time.
It would have been. This is the policy that's written down in our documents, Your Worship.
Yes.
You get to blame me.
Mr. Smith.
I just want to apologize to Mayor and Council. Mayor Brown did raise this item to my attention earlier today, and I just haven't had the opportunity to seek out that yet. So my apologies to Mayor and Council for not having confirmed that point.
Considering the timings, we can defer this to a later meeting if you wish. And nothing has been moved or seconded yet, so it would be entirely apropos for staff to simply withdraw the report at this point and bring it back after checking that sort of thing for the next agenda.
And I'm hoping that when we do find that information, that we also added the LGLA as a...
Believe me, Your Worship, I'll be watching the entire meeting.
Okay. So what did you want us to do with this? Just leave it for another... If we leave it too long, we won't leave it too long. Yes.
The only thing that I would say is if you are wanting to have multiple people attend, like you can still address that now. You just need a resolution from council to deviate from the policy. If you want to send 2 people, you can. This is your policy, but don't let that get in the way if that's what you want. So feel free to deal with it now, and I will go back and check to make sure where this is aligned.
Councillor Richard? I'll get Christopherson next.
Just one comment that I did really want to make. LGLA is coming up next month, and they ran it in 2020 before the COVID restrictions happened, and the content that they had in there was quite detailed and a lot of information on intakes for government funding that was provided at the meetings. I found it very informative, and the speakers that they had, because it was held in Richmond, were actually able to attend where they weren't affected by weather, where when we had the SILGA January 23rd, 2019, or whoops, January 28th. Anyway, the point is it was the end of January in 2019, and there was a lot of people that didn't show up because of weather events, and I think LGLA had a lot of information, I thought it was worth people going to, and that one happens in April, so if we delay to the next meeting, which wouldn't be until the 22nd, do we have any requirement to have any space before we vote, or since it's just policy? I just think they're really worth going to the LGLA, that's all. Thanks.
We will have enough time, I think, to register for LGLA if we have staff look into this issue and get back to us by the next meeting. FCM is another issue. So if we can, I know Etchart and Luck have gone. The rest of you have not. So, Councillor Christopherson.
I think way back when, in the land before time.
Are we going back that far?
To my childhood. No, I think when we first became a council, that we had offered to go certain places, and I believe that I had said I would go to Regina.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to go to Regina this year, but I did look up the conference, and there's some really good information in there from how to deal with reconciliation issues, but also looking at towns that have gone through catastrophes and so on. So it looks like it's a well-planned conference, and although I don't really want to travel, you can still do it virtually, and if that's still an option, or I think it's well worth going, and if it's done virtually, probably any of the councillors can attend. I don't know how. Maybe not. You have to pay for it.
The city paid for me to attend a virtual conference, I think, when it was in Montreal, but everything was 3 hours ahead. And it didn't start until noon, and it was just, it was hard to get to it. And it was, anyways.
So anyways, I would be interested in attending it virtually, but not.
That can be arranged.
I really don't want to go all the way out.
That can be arranged. Mr. Smith.
What I will say is that for anyone who does attend these other communities, and I actually think Regina's, you can say what we want, it's got some really cool features in Regina, where they've actually done some unique things with their downtown in particular, and we could send you on some investigatory missions for some of these points. And so I think that I almost at times find it more important to go to these communities that are working. I'm going to say something here that I hope doesn't get me in trouble. They're working to counter the negative stigma that are facing them. What we just did for Regina, the Lower Mainland does for us all the time. And what are they doing to combat that? And what can we be doing to combat that? These conferences can actually be a really good opportunity if you get in the heart of downtown, talk with owners, talk with especially the locals, to be able to understand what initiatives have worked, what hasn't. So I will say that for any conference, I love it when council brings that information back, because that's the ground truth thing that can actually really make a difference for communities and really help inform council policy for years to come. So as much as I love what you bring back from the knowledge from the sessions, I think the critical eye for how the city has developed and what initiatives they've implemented to support their businesses, their business community in downtowns, that can be a really meaningful part of these that I never want to discount. And Mayor Brown knows I don't think FCM is the most valuable conference on earth, but you can find value if you make value. So
yes. And Councillor Fair and Councillor White have not yet attended an FCM. If you choose to do so, now is your time to throw your hat in the ring. June
Your Worship?
Something or other.
Yeah, so the FCM is, sorry, I just had that on screen. That's the June of this year.
2nd to 5th, I think.
2nd to the 5th, and registration should be done by April 22nd, and the LGLA one registration should be done by April 1st. So we do have time for both of those.
Okay, so think about it and let us know. We'll have to have a resolution to send you, so
we'll have it on the next item, next agenda, Your Worship.
Yeah.
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 No, well, I've been one, so I don't need to go again. So I mean, these are the two likely candidates. So.
We haven't gone to any conferences for the last few years, so in my mind, it's open to. Conferences are open this year. Our budget is different, and our finance manager will tell us probably slow down a bit, but this is where the real life, not virtual, begins. So, okay, we'll let us know, and we'll try to bring it to the next meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay, so 9.6, proposed dog park relocation. Mr. Lois, it's you again.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this refers to the dog park in the city, which obviously was severely damaged during the flooding event. It's currently, or formerly, not entirely sure what tense to use on that, located immediately adjacent to the Public Works yard, and it was under a substantial amount of water as that area functionally became part of the river in mid-November. Obviously, the amount of work required to reconstruct that would be substantial. There is an insurance payout available. We know that we've historically been looking at a future wish to relocate the dog park in order to make room for expansion of the Public Works yard. And so considering the rebuilding work which is required, that is something that I'd like to bring forward as staff to council at this point in time. Speaking from the perspective as, my department enforces bylaws, and of course we're all aware that there's at the moment a city's worth of dogs that have nowhere they can run off leash. They do have the bush available outside the city. Obviously that's not fenced in and has the increased risk of animal encounters. But according to the bylaws, the animal control bylaw, which you've passed, makes it an offence to be off-leash anywhere within the city, other than the designated dog park. So at this point, there is nowhere in the city available for them. So whether you would like reconstruction on the current site or as a staff proposal to relocate, then we would think that would be a good idea to get on with one way or the other. The proposed site for relocation is the city-owned grassed area, which is immediately adjacent to the river opposite Centennial Park.
Grassed area? Is it still grassed?
It was before the waters came through, at least. So that's... Looking at a map, you'd probably like to describe it as a park, except it's never been formally designated as a park. It isn't considered a park in city bylaw terms. It is zoned P2, which allows for use of as a park, but it's never been turned into one. So this is compliant with the zoning. No changes to land use regulations would be required. It's the proposal to use what is an open space as an outdoor open space. And the report had attachments, which included the proposal of how to use. So that would be the blue outline is, I believe, the proposed parking lot, and the orange outline is the proposed dog run area, which would be slightly larger than the former location adjacent to the Public Works yard.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lois? Councillor Fair.
Thank you. Two questions. First of all, has a small dog separation been considered? And a resident recently raised the concern of the silt and contamination and how that would be dealt with. So if we can speak to that.
Either or.
Mr. Smith, Your Worship.
Mr. Smith.
So I really do want council to know that we have heard not 1, 2, or even 8 times about the small dog, large dog distinction. Quite honestly, I think it's probably something that we should have remedied years ago, but we have the opportunity to look at that function now, particularly where there's a little bit more land available with this. You will note that I would not call this a specific design plan, what you have up there right now. Fairly general in nature, but as part of this, we didn't want to go down the route of designing what this would look like if council wasn't comfortable with the change in site. So yes, what I can say is we will incorporate an opportunity for small dog, large dog separation as part of this. And I'm going to look Charlie and Don, you guys hold me accountable on that, because if Sky was here, I would say the same. The second question in relation to the silt, obviously the removal there is going to be a major part of this project, and that's something that we would need to get on. Contamination, those soil samples that we've received have come back really favorably to date. I think that we want to do what we can to support dog owners, and we've still done some ongoing testing, and so I will happily have a conversation with our recovery team. If we've still got samples going out, I don't mind making sure that we include some samples from this site in particular to reassure owners if they haven't already been done. So excellent point for follow-up and feedback, and we will take that back to the team.
Thank you.
Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I really support this. I think it's a great location there, and I longer-term vision, I see this being incorporated into a bigger park in that area as well, and I think that's a really good place for it. My only concern is as long as we don't take the fence right to the river, that we're going to make sure we can accommodate the path along there as well in the future, right? The river walkway and all that'll all be taken into consideration. That's beyond my thing. You don't want to have that behind a fence with big dogs in it. So other than that, I fully support it. I think it's great.
Thank you. And it'll have lighting. Tell me it will. Our citizens have been asking for lighting now. Mr.
So,
Smith.
Once again, I will say that this project really hasn't been designed to date. So will there be lighting? I think that's a very sensible thing that we can and will likely include. So what we will do after this is, if you guys give us the thumbs up, we'll figure out what it would have cost to rebuild in the other area. We'll get a cost that we would have to reallocate to the project here. And then we may need to come to you once again with an amendment to the capital plan if there are extras on top of that. And I will suffer the wrath of my compatriot to my left as a result of more budget amendments after the fact. So,
and so the current dog part is being replaced by insurance funds, right?
Yeah, we have insurance funds available as part of that. Again, I'm going to make the same thing I said before, subject to policy limitations, but the dog park is mostly grass. You're getting fencing. There's not going to be a huge amount of dollars that are going to be added to this project, but we will also make your notes for lighting. Is there any other requests?
Fencing,
lemonade
water.
Dispensing?
Water would be good, and picnic tables is what I've heard over the years, or some kind of seating or some, as the dogs are running around.
I'm hearing you want a high-class dog
I think
park.
so. I mean, we're going to redo it. Why not? Hey, that's not a bad idea.
I'm looking at Charlie right now. He's this project's growing. That's right.
Give us the option to do a number of those things.
Yeah. What we can and we will do is, maybe once we've got some project, we want to get started really, especially in the silt removal, but once we've got some design elements, we might have the opportunity to engage as an information item or something like that to give you a heads up as to where we're at, and you could tell us if we're on track or not. So.
And so far, I haven't asked for a mover or a seconder.
Nope.
Luck and Christofferson, that council instructs staff to relocate the dog park as proposed. And anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Fair.
Yes, I would like to speak to this, in particular to those who I've seen make comments such as this should not be a priority at this time. The dog owners who have had their dogs pent up know the value of something like this. In addition to the fact that we have insurance that will cover, I guess, at least the lion's share of the cost here, that should be bared in mind as well as the fact that the current dog park is destroyed and it would cost money to replace that. So all things considered, it, in my opinion, is definitely a prudent time to go ahead with this. And I will be voting for the motion.
Thank you. And Councillor Edgart.
I think
Oh,
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith.
If you would allow me, Your Worship, to add one comment to dovetail on Councillor Fair's. I really do want the public to know as well that the reason we've got a recovery team set up is so that the public can have the confidence that recovery projects are being advanced regardless of what's happening on ordinary kind of city business type projects. We are advancing projects on both fronts, and what we're doing in one is not holding up the other in any way.
Thank you for that.
All systems go and full steam ahead on recovery projects because we've brought people, teams, experts in place to be able to drive those projects forward, and much of the city staff is back to city operations to address the normal side, and that those positions, we are being supported by the province to make that happen right now, and so we're grateful for that assistance. So if that helps in any way.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Edgart.
With the idea of moving the dog park, I think that people really have to consider that after an event, indemnity is to put you back in the place that you were before the event happened. And this way, if we do move the park, not only can we have the park and design it properly so that we can accommodate the large and small dogs, which will please residents, we also have the land available for future expansion of the treatment plant, and having it in close proximity to what's there, which is favorable for expansion and would be ideal. So while we have the chance to fix what was already damaged, we also have long-term plan in effect that we can look ahead, because the next council will have to deal with, well, next councils of what happens in the future, and we have to kind of think ahead for big picture what's going to happen in the future for our needs in the future. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson, did you want to add to any of that? And you'll need to turn the mic on first, if it's not already on.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to Councillor Etchart's points there. There is a methodical approach to this dog park, and especially in regards to the comment about fencing. We will start with temporary fencing to start this, as we need the dike report to come to fruition, so that we can, when we do move to a permanent solution, we need to know what those setbacks are of the dike. So we'll start with temporary fencing, and then move to a more permanent solution once reports come in and once studies come in. As you'd probably see that square footage shrink, probably start off quite a bit larger, and then we'll reevaluate to see if this is the permanent location for that park.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on the dog park, proposed dog park? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, none, carried. And that brings us to the end of our meeting. Oh, does not. Are there any notices of motion? Mr. Lois is always there to let me know. No notices of motion? How about okay.
This has been a concern of a lot of public out there and everything, and I was just thinking about it today, and I think I'd like to make a notice of motion to have staff investigate ideas on how to deal with a number of unsightly and untidy properties in the community. I know we got bylaws and everything there, but they're not being enforced, and I'm wondering if we could get a report or something to we find ways to deal with it. This is exclusive of the flood
we don't
damage.
Get to debate. We're just asking for your notice of
Well,
motion.
I'm just clarifying what, yeah, I'm not debating.
So unsightly properties?
Unsightly and, yeah, untidy and unsightly properties.
Okay.
Sorry? Not, yeah, exclusive of the flood damage. This is,
okay.
And I think we kind of know some of the properties, so, yeah.
Okay.
Okay?
So any other notices of motion? Okay, reports from council. Councillor White.
The Hell or High Water is moving along like bigger than our expectations.
Good.
And we can now confirm that it will be shown on all the Shaw community channels throughout the province. So that will give us a huge audience. And
the date and time again?
Sunday, 10 a.m., March 13th.
10 a.m. to 10 p.m.?
10 a.m. to 10 p.m. It'll be on 3 different platforms on the internet and then the Shaw Cable channel.
Thank you. Any other reports from council? Councillor Luck?
I just have one request from the scout group in the Lower Mainland that's planning on their giveaway. I believe it's this Saturday, and she just wanted a count of how many councillors were going to be there, and be able to. She asked me just to check. Kurt, Travis, Mary, you'll be there.
I've already told him.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 or 6. Okay, good. Thank you. That's all she wanted me to report back.
Okay. There's no information. Oh, March 15th, right. 286 is the groundbreaking for 286, and that's up at the 286 site.
And what time is that?
11 a.m. Any other notices or reminders? Okay, and I will terminate this meeting.